I never thought I'd go to war with my own HOA. But when they showed up unannounced on my private island, bulldozers in tow, and told me they were installing cell towers for the community's benefit, I knew this wasn't just about better phone service. My island was the last untouched piece of land in Willow Cove. No noise, no pollution, just quiet. And now they wanted to ruin it. The HOA president, Mr. Caldwell, smirked as he handed me the notice. "You signed the bylaws, Alex. We have the right to develop common areas." I clenched the paper. "Common areas? This is my property." He shrugged. "The legal team disagrees. Construction starts tomorrow." That's when I decided if they wanted a fight, I'd give them one. And I had the perfect weapon, trees. I spent that night researching like a madman. Turns out the HOA's bylaws had loopholes, big ones. They could claim common areas, but only if the land wasn't privately maintained. And I'd been cultivating this island for years. The next morning, I called my lawyer, but she just sighed. "Alex, they've done this before. They'll tie you up in court until you're broke." I hung up, staring at the ancient oak in my backyard. That's when it hit me. If I couldn't beat them legally, I'd beat them biologically. I drove straight to the nearest nursery and bought every fast-growing tree they had. Bamboo, hybrid poplars, leyland cypress, anything that could shoot up like a rocket. The cashier raised an eyebrow. "Starting a forest?" I grinned. "Something like that." By sundown, I'd planted a wall of saplings right where the cell towers were supposed to go. The nursery guy said they'd take years to mature, but he didn't know about the experimental growth serum I'd ordered online. One drop, and these trees would be towering in weeks. 3 days later, the bulldozers returned. Mr. Caldwell led the crew, looking smug, until he saw the green barrier. "What the hell is this?" I leaned against my porch. "A privacy hedge. You got a problem with trees?" He turned red. "This is obstruction. We have permits." I tossed him a copy of the HOA's own landscaping rules. "Page 42, buddy. Homeowners may plant native vegetation without approval." His jaw tightened. "Those aren't native." I smirked. "Prove it." The crew left, but I knew this wasn't over. That night, I caught flashlights moving near the trees. 2 HOA lackeys were inspecting them. I crept closer, hearing one mutter, "These shouldn't be growing this fast." The other snapped photos. "Boss ain't gonna like this." I waited until they left, then checked my trees. The serum was working, almost too well. The bamboo stalks were as thick as my arm, leaves rustling like whispers. For the first time, I wondered if I'd created something I couldn't control. Next morning, the HOA slapped me with a new violation: unauthorized genetic modification. I laughed until I saw the fine, $50,000. Caldwell's note said, "Remove the trees, or we will." I crumpled it. They had no idea what they were dealing with. That afternoon, I injected the trees with a second dose. By midnight, their roots had cracked the walking path. By dawn, they'd swallowed the no trespassing sign. I watched from my window as branches curled toward the HOA security cameras like living things. The serum wasn't just speeding up growth, it was making them aggressive. A week later, the first tower crew arrived with chainsaws. I didn't stop them. Let the HOA see what happens. The foreman took one swing at a poplar, and the tree swung back. A whip-like branch smacked the chainsaw from his hands. The crew bolted. By noon, videos of killer trees were all over Facebook. Caldwell showed up with the sheriff, demanding I contain this biohazard. I crossed my arms. "You wanted the land. Take it." The sheriff stepped forward until a root tripped him. The trees were spreading. Fast. Panic hit Willow Cove when the power went out. The trees had grown into transmission lines. Residents screamed about property damage, but their complaints died when cell service dropped. No towers meant no signals. Caldwell's voicemail to me was frantic. "You've gone too far." I played it back, smiling. Then I grabbed my pruning shears. Time to negotiate. The emergency HOA meeting was packed. People shouted over each other until I walked in. Silence. Caldwell glared. "This is your doing." I dropped a folder on the table. "Actually, it's yours. Your cell tower deal was really a cover for selling our land to a developer." I found the emails. The room erupted. He turned pale. I continued. "But I'll uproot my trees if you cancel the towers and resign." The vote was unanimous. As for the trees, they kept growing. Turns out the serum was permanent. Now, Willow Cove has the world's first organic cell tower blocker. A forest so dense not even a satellite signal gets through. Caldwell moved to HOA meeting. I woke up to an eerie silence. The usual chirping of birds was gone. I stepped outside and froze. Overnight, the trees had grown another 5 feet. Their branches now stretched across the road, completely blocking access to my island. The serum was still working, far beyond what I'd anticipated. I reached out to touch a trunk and yanked my hand back. The bark was warm, almost like living flesh. That's when I noticed the sap. It was thick, glowing slightly and pulsing as if it had a heartbeat. My stomach dropped. What exactly had I created here? The first call came from Mrs. Henderson across the cove. "Alex, something's wrong with the water," she whispered, voice shaking. I rushed over to find her dock covered in thin, vine-like roots snaking up from below. The entire shoreline was being invaded by my tree's root systems. As I watched, a root twitched like a finger testing the air. This wasn't normal growth. This was something hunting. I waded into the water and nearly screamed when something brushed my leg. The roots were spreading underwater, moving with purpose. Whatever I'd unleashed, it was adapting faster than I could track it. By noon, half the neighborhood had gathered at the community center in panic. Old Man Wilkins kept babbling about his vegetable garden being absorbed overnight. Little Mia Peterson showed us her dog's collar. The metal tags were covered in the same glowing sap. That's when the power surges started. Every electronic device within a mile of my trees began malfunctioning. Phones displayed garbled text, car radios picked up only static, and security cameras showed distorted images of moving branches even when the wind was still. The trees weren't just blocking signals anymore. They were interfering with them, maybe even learning from them. Caldwell's replacement, the new HOA President Lisa Cho, pulled me aside. "We need to contain this before someone gets hurt," she said quietly. I agreed, but how? The trees resisted all attempts at cutting them. Chainsaws jammed, axes bounced off, and any damage we did make healed within minutes. That night, I snuck into my makeshift lab, really just my garage, and reviewed the serum's formula. That's when I found it, a tiny notation in the margins of the instructions. Caution. Photosynthetic amplification may trigger unexpected biomimetic behaviors. The trees weren't just growing, they were evolving. The next morning brought the worst surprise yet. The trees had started producing fruit. Strange, bulbous pods hung from their branches, pulsing gently. When one fell and split open, thick tendrils shot out and anchored into the ground before we could react. Within hours, new saplings sprouted where the pod had landed. My creation was reproducing. People started packing their cars, but the roads were already half blocked by roots. The sheriff declared an emergency, but when state officials arrived, their equipment failed the moment they entered Willow Cove. We were being quarantined by my own mistake. Lisa and I formed an uneasy alliance. "There has to be an off switch," she insisted as we pored over my notes. Then I remembered. The serum was activated by moonlight. What if we could reverse the process? That night, we set up giant mirrors to block the moon's rays from reaching the trees. For a few hopeful hours, the growth seemed to slow. Then the trees adjusted. Branches twisted to catch the reflected light instead. One even seemed to reach toward the mirrors deliberately. We were dealing with intelligence now, not just plants. The breaking point came when the first tree uprooted itself. I watched in horror as a 50-foot oak pulled its roots from the ground like legs and took a single, shuddering step. The sound was like 1,000 bones cracking at once. It settled back down, but the message was clear. They could move now. That's when the internet cut out completely, not just in Willow Cove, but in the entire county. My trees had grown so tall they were disrupting signals regionally. Government helicopters circled but couldn't get close. Their instruments went haywire near the canopy. Lisa made the call I'd been dreading. "We need to burn them," she said grimly. I wanted to argue, but what choice did we have? As crews prepared the flame units, I noticed something strange. The trees had stopped growing outward. Instead, they were growing inward. Their trunks thickened unnaturally, bark hardening to a near-metallic sheen. Were they preparing for the fire? That's when the first pod burst open, not with tendrils, but with what looked like thick, pollen-filled spores. The wind carried them toward the fire crews. I opened my mouth to shout a warning, but it was too late. The moment the spores touched the flames, they ignited like tiny incendiary devices. 3 fire trucks went up in flames before anyone could react. We retreated to the community center, now more prison than shelter. The trees had component placement their roots, forming an impenetrable wall. Through the windows, I could see them shifting, rearranging themselves in patterns that almost looked designed. Lisa gripped my arm. "This isn't your fault," she lied. I knew better. I'd wanted to stop some cell towers. Instead, I'd awakened something ancient and hungry. The trees weren't just alive anymore. They were awake, and they were watching us. That night, the temperature dropped suddenly. Frost formed on the windows, except near the trees, where the air remained strangely warm. Then the humming started. A low, vibrating tone that made my teeth ache. It came from the trees, pulsing in waves. When I pressed my hand against the glass, I felt it resonate through my bones. They were communicating. With each other. With us. With something else. The radio crackled to life unexpectedly, broadcasting nothing but that same eerie hum. Then words formed in the static, clear as day. "We are Root." Lisa and I exchanged terrified looks. This wasn't over. It was only beginning. And I was the only one who might know how to stop it, if I could decipher my own notes in time. The trees were learning, evolving, becoming. And unless I found a solution fast, Willow Cove wouldn't be the last place they conquered. The humming grew louder, vibrating through the walls until the community center's windows shattered. We covered our ears as the sound became unbearable, then suddenly stopped. In the ringing silence, we heard it. A creaking, groaning noise from outside. I peered through the broken window and my blood ran cold. The trees were rearranging themselves, their trunks twisting into spirals that formed symbols. Ancient-looking markings I somehow recognized from the serum's formula notes. Lisa grabbed my shoulder. "You understand this, don't you?" I swallowed hard. The symbols matched the warning labels I'd ignored on the serum vials. This wasn't just accelerated growth. I'd accidentally activated some kind of dormant plant consciousness. The next morning brought an even more horrifying discovery. The trees had grown a perfect circle around Willow Cove, their canopy forming an impenetrable dome. Sunlight filtered through in strange patterns, casting moving symbols on the ground like some kind of living projection. When I touched one, my skin tingled violently. The sheriff tried to lead an evacuation, but the trees had sealed all exits. His radio crackled with panicked reports. The same phenomenon was happening in neighboring towns. Whatever this was, it was spreading. Mrs. Henderson's cat bolted outside and brushed against a tree root. Before our eyes, the root wrapped around the cat gently, and the animal went completely still, its eyes glazing over with a faint green hue. When it walked back inside, it ignored us completely, heading straight for the water pipes and scratching at them obsessively. That's when the dream started. Everyone in Willow Cove reported the same nightmare. Visions of towering forests covering the entire planet, with humans living peacefully beneath the canopy in vine-covered huts. In the dreams, we heard a voice whispering, "Symbiosis," over and over. Lisa woke screaming about roots growing under her skin. I checked my own arms and found faint green veins I'd never noticed before. The serum had been in my garage for months before I used it. Had I been exposed this whole time? Was that why I could almost understand what the trees wanted? By day 3, the trees began producing a sweet-smelling nectar. Despite our fears, some desperate residents tried drinking it. Within hours, they reported feeling euphoric, claiming they could hear the trees singing. Their eyes took on that same green tint as the cat's. They stopped eating normal food, instead spending hours sitting motionless under the trees, their skin taking on a bark-like texture. When we tried to pull one away, vine-like tendrils shot from the ground and pulled him back gently but firmly. The message was clear. Once you joined them, there was no going back. The military arrived with flamethrowers and chainsaws, but their weapons jammed or malfunctioned the moment they entered the tree zone. A helicopter tried dropping fire retardant, but the trees somehow directed wind currents to blow it away. That night, I had the most vivid dream yet. I saw Earth from space, watching as green spread across continents at impossible speed. When I woke, my hands were covered in that glowing sap, and I knew 2 things with absolute certainty. This wasn't just happening in Willow Cove anymore, and the trees weren't the enemy. They were trying to save us from something much worse. Something coming. Something that explained why they'd allowed the military to cut down exactly 47 trees before stopping them. Why that exact number? I raced to my notes, realizing the symbols matched coordinates. The trees were pointing us somewhere. Lisa and I farm. The trees had grown in a perfect spiral around it. When we peered down, we didn't see water. We saw the roots had formed a perfect tunnel leading straight down. The humming grew louder, almost welcoming. Then we found the first of the metal fragments. Strange, unidentifiable alloy that made our fillings ache when we touched it. The trees had been hiding something buried here for who knows how long. Something they'd apparently been protecting us from until we forced their hand with the serum. As we uncovered more fragments, a terrible thought occurred to me. What if the cell towers were never about communication? What if they'd been designed to wake up whatever was buried here? And what if the HOA knew that all along? The trees suddenly went completely still. The humming stopped. Even the wind died. In that perfect silence, the ground beneath us trembled slightly. Then, all at once, every tree in Willow Cove turned their branches toward the well. The message was unmistakable. We'd found what they wanted us to find. But were we supposed to dig it up or keep it buried? As I reached for another metal fragment, it moved on its own, skittering across the ground like a living thing. The trees shuddered violently. Above us, the sky darkened unnaturally fast. My skin prickled with static electricity. Whatever slept beneath Willow Cove was waking up, and the trees were the only thing holding it back. I looked at Lisa and saw the same realization in her eyes. We hadn't started this war. We'd just joined it at the worst possible moment. And now the fate of more than just our neighborhood might depend on whether we could communicate with our accidental creation before it was too late. The metal fragments began assembling themselves into a shape that made my mind recoil. The trees responded by growing thorns for the first time, massive, crystalline spikes that glowed with that same eerie light. This wasn't over. The real battle was just beginning, and somehow I knew the HOA's cell towers had been the first shot fired in a war humanity didn't even know we were fighting. The metal fragments clicked together like a grotesque puzzle, forming something that hurt my eyes to look at. Angles all wrong, surfaces that seemed to shift when I blinked. Lisa vomited beside me as the thing took shape, a twisted mockery of geometry that pulsed with sickly purple light. The trees reacted violently, their crystalline thorns vibrating at a frequency that made my teeth ache. I grabbed Lisa's arm and dragged her back just as the first root speared up from the ground, impaling the metal horror, only for the tendrils of liquid metal to reform around it, absorbing the organic matter. The tree that had attacked withered instantly, its leaves turning to ash before our eyes. Whatever this thing was, it fed on life itself. That's when the whispers started. Not from the trees this time, from the metal monstrosity. They slithered into my brain like oil, in no language I knew yet somehow understood. We slept. You woke us. The harvest begins. Lisa screamed, clawing at her ears as the voice infected her mind too. The remaining trees encircled us, their bark splitting open to reveal glowing green veins that pulsed in unison, a counter-rhythm to the metal thing's vibrations. I realized with dawning horror that this wasn't just a battle. It was a conversation, one that had been going on for millennia beneath our feet, with humanity none the wiser until I'd stupidly poured experimental serum into the soil and given the trees a voice loud enough to fight back. We stumbled back toward town, only to find Willow Cove transformed. The residents who'd drunk the nectar now stood motionless in perfect rows, their green-tinged eyes fixed on the sky. Vines had grown through their clothing, fusing with their skin in delicate lacework patterns. They weren't dead. When I touched Mrs. Henderson's shoulder, she turned her head with eerie smoothness and smiled. No more hunger, no more pain, only root and branch and the great weaving. Her voice wasn't entirely human anymore. It carried the same vibrational quality as the trees. The sheriff, or what was left of him, had vines bursting from his uniform sleeves, flowering buds where his fingers should be. He pointed toward the well with a creaking motion. The metal ones came before. They will come again. You must choose. Joe's radio suddenly crackled to life with panicked transmissions from neighboring towns. Reports of metal growths erupting from the ground in exact 47-point patterns. Satellite images showing strange geometric formations appearing in forests nationwide. A hysterical newscaster screaming about the White House lawn, sprouting crystalline trees before the feed cut to static. The scale of this disaster crashed over me. I hadn't just endangered Willow Cove. The serum's effects had spread through root systems, traveling who knows how far. And now the trees were mobilizing for war against something buried. Deep in the earth, using transformed humans as their soldiers. Back at the well, the metal entity had grown to the size of a car, its shifting surface reflecting impossible geometries. The tree's assault intensified, whole trunks uprooting themselves to slam into the thing only to be absorbed. But with each absorption, I noticed something. The metal darkened slightly, its movements growing sluggish. The trees were sacrificing themselves to poison it. That's when I understood the horrible truth. This was why they'd allowed themselves to be cut down earlier. They'd been feeding the metal entity contaminated samples, dosing it with the serum to make it vulnerable. And now, the HOA's cell towers made sense too. They'd been designed to emit frequencies that weakened the tree's defenses. Someone had been trying to awaken the metal horror on purpose. A thunderous crack split the air as the ground near the well collapsed, revealing a yawning cavern. From it emerged shapes. Not the twisted metal, but humans, or what used to be humans. Their bodies were encased in sleek metallic carapaces, moving with unnatural precision. The lead figure removed its helmet, and my heart stopped. It was Caldwell. His eyes were pure silver, his smile stretching too wide. "Alex," he crooned, in a voice that buzzed with static. "You've done so well. We needed the trees to awaken, you see, needed them to think they were winning. Now the signal can propagate properly." He held up a device that made my vision blur, a smaller version of the cell towers, pulsing with the same purple light as the metal entity. "The great weaving he promised is a lie. There is only the harvest, and you've just given them the perfect delivery system for it." The trees went berserk. Vines lashed out, dragging two of the metal humans underground with terrifying speed. The remaining trees formed a protective circle around Lisa and me, their bark peeling back to reveal glowing cores. Caldwell just laughed. "Your little forest can't stop what's coming. The towers are already built. The frequency is already singing. And thanks to your serum, every root system on this continent is now a highway for the awakening." He pressed a button on the device. Somewhere deep below us, something enormous stirred. The tree's humming became a shriek of agony. The ground trembled as ancient machinery far beneath Willow Cove powered up for the first time in millennia. And worst of all, I felt it answering the call. The serum in my veins, the green tint in my vision, the way I could suddenly understand the tree's desperate warnings. I wasn't just a bystander in this war. The trees had marked me as something else, something Caldwell's masters apparently needed badly enough to orchestrate this entire catastrophe. As the first massive metal tendril burst from the cavern behind Caldwell, I realized with icy certainty whatever was coming next, I was meant to be its key. And the trees had one last desperate play to stop that from happening, whether I wanted them to or not. The ground heaved violently as the colossal metal tendril erupted skyward, its surface crawling with those impossible shifting geometries. Caldwell's silver eyes gleamed with triumph as the device in his hands pulsed faster, synchronizing with the awakening horror below. The trees surrounding us shuddered in unison, their crystalline thorns glowing brighter than I'd ever seen. Not green anymore, but a deep, warning red. Lisa grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "They're not protecting us anymore," she whispered. "They're preparing to destroy everything." A sound like 1,000 shattering mirrors filled the air as the trees began exploding. Not from attack, but deliberately. Each detonation released a cloud of glowing spores that hung in the air, forming a shimmering barrier between us and the metal monstrosity. Where the spores touched the metal, it darkened and cracked, but the effect wasn't strong enough. The massive tendril kept growing, its tip now splitting open like some grotesque flower to reveal a pulsating core of violet light. The light formed shapes, numbers, symbols, equations that burned themselves into my vision. My head felt ready to split open as knowledge not meant for human minds flooded into me. I suddenly understood. This wasn't just some alien machine, it was a seed. And it had been planted here long before humans walked the earth, waiting for the right conditions to sprout. Caldwell's laughter turned guttural, his jaw unhinging unnaturally as metallic tendrils burst from his mouth. "The gardener comes," he gurgled before his body collapsed into a writhing mass of liquid metal. The other silver-eyed figures did the same, their bodies dissolving and flowing toward the main tendril like mercury racing toward a magnet. The remaining trees reacted with terrifying speed. Roots erupted from the ground to intercept the flowing metal, absorbing it. But with each absorption, the trees darkened, their leaves wilting. They were sacrificing themselves to buy time. Lisa dragged me toward town as the world unraveled behind us. Houses collapsed as roots pulled them underground. The sky turned in sickly purple at the edges. The transformed residents stood frozen in their rows, now connected by thick vines that pulsed with the same rhythm as the metal seed's light. As we passed Mrs. Henderson, her vine-covered hand shot out to grab me. "The serum in your blood," she whispered urgently. "It's the key. You're the hybrid they never accounted for." Before I could ask what she meant, her body went rigid, her eyes flashing silver. The metal entity was taking control of the transformed humans now. We barely made it to my garage lab before the ground buckled again. The serum formula still lay on my workbench, but something was different. The notes had changed. Equations I'd never written now covered the margins, in handwriting that wasn't mine. Lisa gasped, pointing to my arms. The green veins were glowing, and when I touched the paper, my fingers left faintly luminous prints. The trees had been modifying me ever since that first exposure, preparing me for this moment. Outside, an unearthly shriek split the air as the metal seed fully emerged, a towering spire of nightmare geometry, humming with that same terrible frequency. But something was wrong with it. Where the tree's spores had touched, blackened cracks spread through its surface. Their sacrifice had weakened it. Mrs. Henderson's words echoed in my mind. "You're the hybrid they never accounted for." I looked at the modified serum formula, then at my glowing veins. The trees hadn't just been fighting the metal seed, they'd been using me to craft a weapon. Lisa's scream snapped me back to reality. The garage walls trembled as roots burst through, but these were different. Blackened and sickly, infected by the absorbed metal. They moved jerkily, out of sync with the other trees. The metal seed was turning the tree's own weapons against them. One root lashed out, spearing straight toward my chest, only to be intercepted at the last second by a fresh vine that glowed electric blue. The two forces warred right in front of us, dripping fluids that burned holes in the concrete where they landed. Then the voice returned, louder than ever. Not just in my head now, but vibrating through the air itself. "The cycle ends. The harvest begins." The metal seed's tip bloomed open fully, releasing a shockwave that flattened every standing structure in Willow Cove. The tree's barrier held, but just barely. Through the glowing spore cloud, I saw the impossible. The seed wasn't just a machine. Inside that pulsating core floated something organic, something alive, something that looked horrifyingly human. Lisa grabbed the modified serum notes with shaking hands. "These instructions, it's not a growth formula anymore. It's a targeting system." She pointed to a diagram that showed a human nervous system intertwined with plant biology. My biology, I realized with dawning horror. The trees hadn't just modified me, they'd turned me into a living weapon, and the final component was currently surging through my veins, waiting for activation. Outside, the metal seed began emitting a new sound, a distorted version of the tree's humming, as if learning to mimic its enemy. The remaining trees responded by driving their roots deep, channeling something up from far below the earth. The ground between us and the seed bulged upward, then split open to reveal a massive, ancient tree stump, one that radiated the same energy as the metal seed, but organic. The original tree, I realized. The one that had been fighting this war since long before humans existed. Its surface was carved with the same symbols that had appeared in my notes. As I stared, the carvings began to glow, and a deep, resonant voice spoke. Not in my mind this time, but aloud, shaking the remains of Willow Cove to its foundations. The gardener awakens. The last child must choose. The metal seed pulsed violently in response, its humanoid figure stirring within the core. The trees around us shuddered, their remaining leaves turning toward me expectantly. Lisa looked at me with tears in her eyes. "It's you," she whispered. "However this started, it's going to end with you." My skin burned as the serum in my veins reacted to the ancient tree's call. Knowledge flooded me. Not painful this time, but clear. The cell towers, the HOA's land grabs, Caldwell's transformation, all steps in a plan millennia in the making. The metal seed wasn't the gardener. It was the harvest, and I was the only thing standing between it and the entire world. As the two ancient forces prepared for their final clash, I made my choice. I reached for the modified serum formula with glowing hands, finally understanding my role in this war. Not a pawn, not a weapon. The gardener's last desperate gamble, a human mind with the power to choose, with blinding light, beginning the countdown to whatever came next. The trees hummed in approval. The metal seed shrieked in rage, and deep below us, something far older than either stirred awake at last. The blinding light from the ancient tree symbols burned into my vision like afterimage from a nuclear blast. My fingers fused with the serum-coated paper in a grotesque merging of flesh and cellulose, the glowing formulas crawling up my arms like living tattoos. Lisa screamed as my skin split open in fractal patterns, not bleeding but sprouting thin, bioluminescent roots that anchored me to the ground. The knowledge flooding my mind now came with agony. I saw everything. The metal seed wasn't just alien technology, but the last remnant of a cosmic predator species that had seeded thousands of worlds with these dormant machines. The trees? They were the immune system of planets, evolved over eons to resist the harvest. And humanity? We'd been engineered as the perfect hybrid vessels to carry both forces, which was why the metal seed needed the cell tower's frequencies to properly activate, and why the trees had modified my serum to fight back. The ancient tree stump shuddered as its roots pulled something massive from the earth. A gargantuan seed pod covered in the same metallic organic hybrid material as my arms. It split open with a sound like a dying star, revealing a hollow interior exactly human-sized. The message was clear. This was how the original gardener had fought back last time. By becoming one with the trees. Lisa tried pulling me away, but my roots held firm. "Don't you see?" I gasped as the serum's changes accelerated. This was never about saving me. They needed someone who could interface with both sides. My voice distorted, taking on the tree's vibrational quality. Across the clearing, the metal seed's humanoid figure finally emerged from its core, a perfect silver replica of me, down to the glowing green veins now turning metallic. Chaos erupted as the two forces collided. The remaining trees launched themselves at the metal seed in suicidal attacks, their crystalline thorns shattering against its surface. The transformed residents moved in unison, their vine-covered bodies forming living bridges between the ancient tree and me. Lisa watched in horror as the ground beneath us became a battleground of writhing roots and liquid metal tendrils. My doppelganger raised its hand, and agony ripped through me as the metal fragments in my body, fillings I'd had since childhood, a plate in my arm from a teenage accident, liquefied and began crawling toward my vital organs. The trees had anticipated this. Their serum had been fortifying my bones with the same crystalline structure as their thorns. The internal war nearly made me black out as the two forces clashed inside my very body. Then the voice came again, this time from both the ancient tree and my metal double simultaneously. The experiment ends. The specimen will be recovered. The revelation hit me like a lightning bolt. This conflict had never been about conquest. Earth was a petri dish, humanity the test subjects, and the current harvest was just the latest data collection cycle. The cell towers weren't weapons, they were sensors, and my accidental serum had contaminated their experiment beyond recovery. The ancient tree made its move. Its roots surged forward, not attacking the metal seed, but embedding themselves in my back like grotesque umbilical cords. Knowledge became physical, as glowing sap pumped directly into my veins, overwriting my human biology with something older. I screamed as my skeleton reconfigured, my organs shifting position. Lisa's horrified expression told me what I couldn't see. Bark like plates forming over my skin, crystalline structures erupting from my joints. Across from me, the metal doppelganger mirrored these changes in reverse, its surface developing organic-looking pores and veins. A new sound cut through the chaos, a frequency that made both the trees and metal recoil. From the ruins of the HOA office, the original cell tower Caldwell had installed pulsed with new energy. Not the purple light of the metal seed, but a blinding white radiance. The tree's reaction was instantaneous. They recognized this signal. It was the same frequency they used to communicate across continents. Someone had hacked the towers to broadcast the tree's own distress call at million-fold amplification. The effect was catastrophic. The metal seed's surface boiled as conflicting commands tore at its structure. My doppelganger staggered, its form flickering between solid and liquid. The ancient tree seized this moment of weakness. With a final, shuddering effort, it launched me at the metal seed's core. Not to attack, to merge. The impact was beyond pain. I felt my conscious serum in my garage. The experiment's firewall shattered as I became the ultimate contaminant. A hybrid mind containing both forces. The last thing I heard before the white noise consumed me was Lisa's voice, somehow cutting through the maelstrom. The towers, they're not just receivers, they're transmitters. You have to show them what's happening here. And then I saw it, the true purpose of the HOA's cell towers. They weren't just waking the metal seed. They were broadcasting Earth's position to whatever cosmic force had planted these seeds across the universe. And right now, with my hybrid consciousness linking every contaminated root system on the planet, I had become the perfect antenna. The trees hadn't just been fighting the metal seed. They'd been preparing to send a warning to every other infected world. A warning now pulsing through my veins, carrying the memories of every human they'd transformed, every life the harvest had consumed. As my consciousness began shattering under the strain, I made my choice. If we were an experiment, let us be the one that fought back. Let us be the virus. I reached through the root network, seized control of every cell tower simultaneously, and with Lisa's voice anchoring what remained of my humanity, I screamed our defiance across the stars. The last thing I saw before the light consumed everything was the metal seed cracking open like an egg, and something far worse beginning to hatch. The light didn't fade so much as change, shifting from blinding white to a deep, pulsating crimson that seemed to rewrite reality itself. My shattered consciousness recoiled as the cracking metal seed revealed not a machine, not an alien, but something infinitely worse, a perfect void in the shape of a man. Where it stepped, the very air stopped moving. Colors drained toward it like water down a cosmic drain. The trees humming became screams as this absence began consuming their light, their energy, their very substance. Lisa's hand on what remained of my bark-covered arm was the only thing keeping me anchored. "It's not a seed," she gasped. "It's a lock, and you just opened it." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. The towers, the metal entities, the ancient conflict, none of it was about harvesting Earth. They'd been prison guards, and whatever we'd just unleashed had been waiting behind those celestial bars since before trees first grew on this planet. The void figure turned its non-face toward me, and where eyes should have been, I saw infinite forests burning. My hybrid mind understood instantly. This was why the trees had gone to war. Not to protect Earth, but to keep this thing contained. The metal seed had been its prison. My doppelganger hadn't been trying to replicate me. It had been trying to warn me. Every action we'd taken, every defense the trees had mounted, had only accelerated the unlocking process. The ground beneath us began dissolving into fractal patterns, reality itself unraveling at the edges. The remaining trees uprooted themselves in a last desperate attempt to reform the prison, only to disintegrate as they neared the void figure. Its attention shifted to Lisa, and she froze mid-breath, her scream trapped in unmoving air. I tried to reach for her, but my body was coming apart at the molecular level, the careful balance of serum and metal and tree matter destabilizing. Then, impossibly, the cell towers activated again. Not broadcasting outward this time, but inward. The purple light from earlier returned with violent intensity, forming a cage of burning equations around the void figure. It shrieked without sound, reality warping around it as the light contracted. That's when I saw the truth. The towers weren't alien technology, they were human. Or rather, they were built by whatever humans would become after surviving this cycle countless times before. The ultimate cosmic defense system, hidden in plain sight as mundane infrastructure. The void figure lashed out, tendrils of nothingness slicing through the light cage. One struck me, and I felt parts of my memory dissolve instantly. My first kiss, my mother's face, the sound of rain on leaves, all gone. The towers pulsed faster, their light now forming familiar patterns, the same symbols that had appeared in my serum notes. They weren't just trying to contain the void, they were trying to communicate with me, with what I'd become. Lisa suddenly gasped back to motion as the void's attention shifted. "The serum," she choked out. "It's not in your blood anymore. You are the serum now." I looked down at my disintegrating hands and understood. The trees hadn't just modified me, they'd turned me into a living template, a pattern that could be replicated. The towers were waiting for one thing, my choice to spread that pattern. The void figure took a step toward us and the ground ceased to exist beneath its with fingers that erased the air as they moved. In that moment I made my decision. I grabbed Lisa and did the one thing neither side had anticipated. I threw us both into the remains of the ancient tree's seed pod. The impact was like diving into liquid memory. I felt my hybrid essence spreading through the pod's network, not just through Earth's root systems, but through something vastly older, the mycelial network connecting all life across time. The pod's interior wasn't empty anymore. It was a tunnel through space-time itself. walls lined with infinite variations of our moment of choice. Some showed Earth consumed by the void. Others showed the metal entities victorious. A few showed the trees covering the planet in silent guardianship.